Thank you, Mr Mundell, and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I thank the Honourable Member for Keighley and Ilkley for his opening, which covered very many of the points that I would make myself. And of course, I would adopt wholeheartedly everything mentioned by my neighbour, the Honourable Member for Glasgow South West. Bonfire Night brings great joy to people across the west coast of Scotland, and for the most part, people use fireworks safely. However, it remains a significant problem in Glasgow and the west of Scotland. I recently met with a constituent who's worked for very many years at Edinburgh Zoo, and one of her responsibilities has been looking after the red pandas and the black and white pandas at the zoo. And she explained to me how the death of the two pandas came about, and there is no doubt that the causation lies with fireworks in Edinburgh. So that constituent of mine, like her colleagues, is absolutely heartbroken at what's become of the red panda. And fireworks cause misery for people with PTSD, young parents, people with autism, animals, and people across Glasgow. We need to think about how we manage and regulate fireworks, because clearly in Scotland and across our family of nations, it is not working. And whilst fireworks bring joy, it's also bringing misery to very many communities. One thing that's happened in Glasgow is that the major public displays, in particular in Glasgow Green, have been cancelled by the SNP Council. And the reason for this has never been fully explained, but we do need to give people opportunities to see fireworks, and councils cancelling them without explaining it will not help. Restricting the use of fireworks is in the main devolved to the Scottish Government, and I regret to say that whilst there has been legislative reform in this area, it has not been an unalloyed success. The flagship measure was the introduction of a licensing system, but that has been postponed to at least 2026, the Scottish Government say, due to resourcing issues. Well, this government has provided £4.9 billion to the Scottish Government, so hopefully they will start to make some progress on introducing this much-needed reform that will prevent misery being inflicted on my constituents and others in Glasgow. The legislation also included firework control zones, and one was to be introduced in Glasgow, in the neighbouring seat to mine. This was bungled by the SNP Council because they simply didn't use the correct time period for the notice. As every trainee lawyer knows, you have to count the days for a notice properly if it's going to be effective. So this has caused misery for my constituents and the constituents of my dear friend, the member for Glasgow South West. A basic error. There is much hard work by council officials, the fire services and the police to deal with fireworks in Glasgow. However, the legislation is not working, it's not properly implemented, and it's not being properly implemented. How can it be that in Edinburgh they can't introduce an exclusion zone for fireworks around a zoo with many animals? How can it be that we can't review the introduction of exclusion zones around things like hospitals and so forth? Clearly the legislation isn't properly implemented, isn't properly drafted, and requires thorough review. I actually am a big fan of fireworks. I love fireworks. But my enjoyment of fireworks should not inflict misery on animals and people in my communities of Glasgow East. It is time clearly in Glasgow and in Scotland and across England and Wales for us to review how our fireworks are regulated. There have been very many good ideas about how to improve the system in this debate, and there is much pause for thought and much to consider and much to learn from every contribution to this debate. However, the current situation, Mr Mundell, is not sustainable, and I submit it is high time that both the Scottish Government and the English Government looked at this again.